Hello and welcome to this edition of the Beacon Hill Report. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network, and joining us in studio today, it's his turn in the rotation, as we like to say. State Representative Chris Markey is joining us. Thank you for coming in again, as always.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. It is late fall as we sit here, and the elections are over. You will have another 2-year term. Congratulations first on that.
Thanks.
Must feel pretty good. People like you.
I think so. I think one of the things that happened is obviously I picked up a new area in New Bedford, the far north end with Sassaquin and Pine Hill Acres in that particular area. I thought I was very happy with the primary. I did have a primary opponent, but I think it was pretty clear that the people of Dartmouth and the north end of New Bedford are pretty consistent with what my beliefs are, and kind of a moderate who thinks that government should work together with both sides, listen to everybody, try to get bits and pieces from everybody. I think if we could do that more at the federal level, we'd be in a better spot.
They're going to have to if they want to get anything done.
Yeah, well, I don't think they've really done much, so it makes it difficult. But I hope that the biggest thing that can come out of the midterms is that it wasn't a red wave. And I think that's important, particularly for Massachusetts. But I think it's important for the country to realize I think people are tired of the extreme, the name calling, all the baloney that's been going on for the last really 6 years.
Right.
So hopefully people can step back, take a breath, and realize government's job is to make sure people reach their potential, not to fulfill egos of politicians.
What were your, I guess, as we look at the overall results of the election, the big thing obviously is we have a new governor. Maura Healey will take the helm in January. Charlie Baker, his 8-year term comes to an end. I guess from your perspective, the 8 years of Charlie Baker, probably the most popular governor in the country, has been said more than once, and your expectations with a new governor taking the ship.
Well, I think first off that Baker is the best governor, and I say it. He's a Republican. I'm a Democrat, but he looked at things in the middle, and I think that's how government should really work, is in the middle. Working in the middle allows people with money who want to invest in communities to know that there's consistency in government. When we go from far left to far right to far left, people with the money can't invest. And those private investments are what give people jobs. And if I had a ton of money, I would question whether to invest in a place where it swings really far right and fairly far left, because policies change, laws change, and might affect the investment that I made. And I think Governor Baker found ways in the middle to find solutions to make sure people had consistency and were able to invest in their communities. And you can see it in Massachusetts with offshore wind, which is huge for this area, that finally there was some consistency in it. Particularly when President Biden took over, got rid of the Trump delays of offshore wind that really hurt a lot of the offshore wind industry.
I know Mayor Mitchell was saying that for offshore wind, we're going to see activity next year.
This morning, I saw the boats coming in this morning, parked over at the marine terminal.
Yeah.
Parked. It's docked. At least use the right words. But those things are what I think made him so successful. I guess I compare it to the courthouse. When I was a young assistant DA, one of the things we used to say, or someone above me, or my mentor would say, if the parties come in and they're not happy and they leave the courthouse, the right thing was probably done. Everyone got a little bit of everything. If they leave the State House and everyone gets a little bit of everything, that's probably the best solution to a problem. And I think Governor Baker did that. And I think Maura Healey gets that. She saw how popular he was. She saw how he brought people together from both sides. He ignored a lot of the extremists, and I think that Governor-elect Healey will end up doing that. She'll want to govern from the middle or closer to the middle and try to find ways to get connections with people. I think she's done that, though. Like she's incredibly competent. She's charismatic. She's a real leader. She's going to be great. And I think the other part about it is The Lieutenant Governor-elect, Kim Driscoll, super smart, super practical. She's a
And
mayor.
I was going to say, she's a mayor and in a city, a seacoast city, Salem. So I mean, her perspective, although not the same as obviously New Bedford, but similarities are there. I know offshore wind is being obviously something that they're doing up at Salem too. So the perspective is going to be interesting too.
I think Salem is very similar to New Bedford. They have a bit of it. They don't have a huge tourism, but they have a day visit, much like New Bedford does. But they, particularly in the fall with the whole Halloween stuff. So she sees the benefits of tourism. She sees the benefit of having a culture in your community, and she sees the understanding of how to use tax dollars and not waste it. And she was very dependable, reliable, and someone who I think a lot of people saw great potential, and that's why she won.
From your perspective, because I know obviously you served on the Judiciary Committee, I don't know if you had any dealings with Maura Healey. What are some of the things, I guess, that people who don't know her, you would say to them what they can expect?
I'd say this is that she has taken some very complex cases and had a staff that put together complex cases and did great work. The Purdue farmer is one instance of it.
Yep.
That's a complex case, working with a bunch of different states to put something together to make someone accountable. Locally, the other thing she has is she's done a great job of making sure that they continue to have local office available, and in New Bedford they have an office here. They've had it for a while. The staff there is wonderful. They're great. I think they're accommodating to everybody from the top down there. So it's great to have that.
She seems familiar with New Bedford too, because she's been here a few times, to say the least.
Yeah, well, she has an office down here,
Right.
so I'm sure she has. But the other side of it is that I think she has the compassion and the understanding of people that she will make her a great leader, and people will want to listen to her and follow her. And I just see her as someone who can take complex issues, put it into simple terms, and be effective. The other thing is I think she's got courage. I think the last thing the state's attorney general wants to do is sue the government, sue the federal government, and take on the president or do whatever. But she did it several times, and it was required at the time to be able to do those things, and she stood up and did them. So I see that as a real bonus to having her running the Commonwealth, where she will have the courage to do new things and try new things out, and be willing to take a risk on the people of the Commonwealth.
As you look at the rest of election night, your thoughts on, I guess, the other state candidates? We have a new auditor, new attorney general. Secretary Galvin will be here again.
Yep. All capable, all competent, all good people who care about what they're doing. I think they put their egos aside and really do the work that's necessary, that they're going to be taking an oath to do. I see Andrea Campbell is doing a great work. She has a great story to tell, but she's also someone who sees what is needed in whether it be criminal justice or consumer affairs. I think she's a bright person.
And I think a word you have to have too in there is, for Attorney General, is courage and compassion.
Yeah.
For that position, you kind of need both.
Oh, you do. I mean, I spend a lot of time in a prosecutor's office, and I think that it's one of those things that I grew into. When you first start off, I think people who knew me back then would say I was very difficult to deal with. As I grew and matured, I started to see the needs to be more compassionate, more empathetic to people who have struggled and had more difficulties. I always took the position that when I saw a young kid from New Bedford who had minor stuff, who had a horrible background, as opposed to a kid from Dartmouth or a kid from North Attleboro or Mansfield who had the privilege of having everything he wanted or she wanted, and then doing what they were doing. A lot of what was happening in New Bedford in the early 2000s was acts of desperation for a lot of people. When you come from a $500,000 house in Mansfield, you don't have that much sympathy for them.
Right.
So those things kind of you grow into and you realize. So I think overall, having that sense of fairness, you got to be firm though. You got to have enough guts to go after somebody,
Right.
and understand the consequences. But at the same token, is you got to be willing to pull back the power that you have and be willing to be compassionate towards people.
The ballot questions obviously were a mixed bag. I know that question one, close, the millionaire's tax, was approved. I know that those that are opposed are questioning whether the legislature could actually be trusted to spend the money as they said they're going to do. I guess your thoughts on that one?
I was a no. I've been a no all the way through. I don't think it's good economics. I don't think it's good civics. It's not what we're supposed to do. I've said it, I've preached it for the last 6 years every time they've done it. First off, you're putting tax policy and a tax rate into the Constitution. It took 8 years for them to be able to change the Constitution to put it in. How can we be flexible with our economy right now even and not be able to adjust the tax rate? Even if it's for millionaires, we're putting it into the Constitution. Would it take at least 2 sessions? It would take 4 years for something to change as far as the tax rate. It doesn't make sense on a government-wise perspective, where and there's another section in the Constitution that requires all money bills to start in the House of Representatives. Well, we're the ones who every year set the tax rate. Every budget that comes out, we set the tax rate in the House of Representatives. We start with a budget. You can't do that when you have this 4% tax in the Constitution. You can't adjust that just on a yearly basis. So we're not going to be flexible and nimble to deal with the consequences of a disruptive economy. And then, obviously the politicians love it because they don't have to take a tax vote on that. That's going to get some money for us. Then on the practical level, I just don't think it makes sense, because I think people with money want to be able to hide money, be able to do other things, and they can be able to move out of the state. If you can move to Florida or up 70 miles to New Hampshire and live tax-free, you might want to do that.
Right.
If you can save $2 or $3 million in taxes.
Yeah.
So, and again, these are high-end people. If you were to take the top 900 taxpayers of Massachusetts and a third of them left the state, you would lose $774 million in tax revenues. So just a third of the 900. That's not an unrealistic number. So that's another thing. And then where the taxes come from, it's not just the income tax. It's not like a W-2 that people get.
Right.
It's all these investments that they make in our communities. And the other part about it is, once these people leave our communities, these nonprofits are not going to benefit from their incredible charity, because a lot of people give money to the Buzzards Bay Coalition, to the Community Foundation, to the Women's Fund, all for purposes of tax benefit and also to help the community locally.
Right.
Now, if they go up to Nashua, New Hampshire, or Manchester, New Hampshire, they may be giving it to their local Y and doing those things, as opposed to in our community down here. So it sounds good, it sounds easy. Politicians love it because they don't have to worry about it. I'm just not a fan of it for those reasons.
I know that the dental question passed rather significantly easily, and the liquor store didn't pass, as I recall. It was a close vote, though. And question 4 was the immigrant's driver's license, which the legislature had already approved. It was, in effect, they were trying to repeal it, and it didn't pass. So effectively, the law stays the same as the legislature passed it.
Yeah. So question 2 is, I know, complex for a lot of people regarding the dentist thing.
And I'm raising my hand. I'm the first one to say, wow, I don't get this.
Well, a couple things. When I read a little bit more about it and how it affects it, I was a yes on it, because I thought that it was important for, and again, I'm sure we will make some adjustments if it's a failure, and that's what we should do. We maybe should have addressed it a long time ago, but if you look at the numbers, a significant amount of the money that we pay in premiums for dental insurance goes towards administrative costs at a much higher rate than regular medical insurance. As a result, that's what this does, is cuts down those administrative costs and make sure that more money goes in towards the payment of the treatment of individuals.
Right.
So that's a good thing. The liquor license one, I was a no on, and I understand what the small package stores are concerned with, and they have a legitimate concern, but I don't know if this is the way to do it.
I was going to say, but isn't that something the legislature should be dealing with?
I do. I do think, and I also think we should really be dealing with it in the dental insurance issues too. But I think when you look at the liquor license, we're in control of the licenses, and people have mortgages on those licenses, and they've spent a lot of money on them. And it's not as easy as just saying, okay, we're going to limit the all liquor licenses and reduce the number, and then we'll increase the number of beer and wine. I don't know if that's really the answer. I think I need to look into it more, but I know there's got to be a change in it, and I think that having on a ballot question really wasn't the answer.
So when something like that passes, whether it's the dental or the liquor, obviously not the driver's license, because that was already enacted. You guys have already done that. So those issues, those were decided. Can the legislature still take them up even after the vote?
Yes.
Is that something you would take up
Yes.
after vote?
I think we have. I'm trying to think I know we did, and I think in 2014 there was something that was a ballot question, and we did not end up doing it.
Okay. So I mean, a lot of people might have issues with those things. It's like, okay, well, you guys still could take a look at it and over the next 2 years do something with it.
Yes.
And the last question was the city one, and I think people, overwhelmingly supported the New Bedford being part of the MBTA. It was a strictly New Bedford question, and you explained to me off camera why it was just New Bedford and the reasons and what it means, I guess, for the city.
Yeah. So essentially, one of the things is I think it's one of those things that's a no-brainer. It's bringing huge investments to our community. Now, there's some people who say, oh, well, it's going to be the gentrification of New Bedford, and the rents are already high enough, and all these other things. Well, I just say to them is like, that's what we're supposed to be doing, right? We're supposed to meet our potential. We're supposed to try to get more investment, try to get better at everything we do. And this is one of those things that will allow our community to get much better. And the investments that people make in the community, there'll be much more of a return on those investments. So essentially what it is making sure that we're part of an MBTA community or district. And what that means is you have to pay a certain amount of money to be in one of those districts. And it also changes some of the zoning issues in regard to that and eases up some of those issues, which are important. So in New Bedford, for instance, we have CERTA. So we're already paying into that fund some money. The money that we would be expending that's a little bit more is nominal in relation to the city budget and to all of that. So it's worth the investment that we've already made into our regional transportation, and now it's going to make it a commuter rail.
And why didn't, for example, people in Dartmouth or Fairhaven vote on it?
Because the stations will be in New Bedford.
And that's specifically the reason it's the stations.
Yeah.
So, and it was, like I said, it passed overwhelmingly. I think people have been waiting for the train for years. So it was probably no surprise that it passed as well as it did.
Yeah.
And I know the mayor's optimistic, talking to him, that late next fall we should see some trains if all goes well.
That's October 2023 is what the target is.
Right. And from what you're hearing, there's no reason not to think that's the case.
No, and I think if people go about and go around through Freetown and into north end of Fall River and see there's a station there. There's all these things that are being developed. Taunton at the 140,
right.
24. You see that getting all developed. That's all has to do with the rail. I mean, you go over after you jump onto 24 North, you can look down from 140 and you can see the brand new railroad track and the railroad bed that's there that goes from Taunton over to Middleborough.
We were talking with State Representative Chris Markey on the Beacon Hill report, and a couple things as people are starting to find out now here as we talk. I know the tax rebates, people are getting checks or deposits in their bank accounts, something that the governor said they were going to do, and they have, and I think people are pleased, obviously, to see that. Some people were wondering if it was going to happen at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think what the delay really is the issue of, is it going to be a permanent tax cut or is it going to be just a rebate from last year's enormous tax revenues that we got? And again, even indications are that we're doing just as well this year as we did last year, which is kind of ironic because people want to say that the economy's doing horrible, people are doing horrible. Yeah, it's not great, but we're getting there and it's going to work out. But if we're bringing in all this tax money, it means someone's making money.
Right.
So we just got to make sure that we're taking our money and we're putting it into wise investments. But I think that money from what is called the 62F, Chapter 62F of 1986, I think is the year, requires the return of a certain amount of money. And that's what's happening. I think people are getting back about 13% of their tax liability. I
was calling 10 because I didn't know the exact number. I know it was about 10, so a little bit more. one of the issues too was you guys were, as the legislature were looking at economic package that was kind of part of that, but as you said, it just got signed.
Yeah, so the economic development didn't include the tax breaks that
we
permanent
talked
tax
about,
breaks
right.
that we had talked about in probably May and June of last year and then into July. But what's going to happen is I'm sure we're going to address them. I think it was universal support on the estate tax to try to figure out a solution to that, raise it to $2 million, and anything over $2 million in a tax will be taxed at a higher rate than at a lower rate or at $1 million.
What about the economic plan in general right now that the legislature did pass? What can you tell us a little bit about that, and how does it benefit the folks down here?
Sure. I'll just talk about one thing really, which I think is huge, is back in December of 2021, there was an emergency order because of COVID increases last winter to make sure that the beds were available if we needed them. So a lot of the local hospitals, that their revenues are generated mostly by orthopedic type surgeries or elective surgeries, and those are the ones where that's their revenue maker.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They don't make money off of the emergency room. They make money off of doing a hip replacement or doing a shoulder replacement or something to that effect. They had to stop those for a while, and as a result of stopping those for a while, they lose their revenue. And as a result, the South Coast Hospital Group, which is a nonprofit, unlike St. Anne's or Stewart, where they're a for-profit, they weren't able to do those things. They needed the money. Most of the people who are going to St. Luke's or St. Anne, or Charlton or Toby, which is part of South Coast, those are we call them disproportionate hospitals, meaning that most of the people who come into the hospital are in public pay,
right.
Medicare, Medicaid, and as a result, the hospital is only really getting about 83 cents per person or per dollar that's spent. So they're losing 14% constantly on those people, and that's like 77% of the population. So as a result of that, they're really down money. And what we did in the economic development bill is we gave about $350 million to those community hospitals. St. Luke's will probably get about St. Luke's will get about $24 million to cut down that deficit that they have.
We've got a couple minutes left. I want to make sure we touch on a couple of things. As you enter the new year, when everybody's sworn in for another legislative session, you were talking that housing is probably going to be your number one issue. And it's obviously an issue in your district, and it seems an issue everywhere right now.
So housing is huge because housing, and I preach this as much as I can, housing is the one thing that develops the middle class. That's why you're seeing such a big gap between a lower class and the higher class, right? Those differences are so significant because people can't invest in their home. Investing in your home allows you to pay for college tuitions, and I'm going through that. It allows you to have generational wealth, something you can pass on to your child. And if you don't have that, that middle class just evaporates. It either just stays down lower and you can never buy a house and you can never afford anything, or you become house poor, right, and you just everything is consumed by the house, and you can't go out and you can't go on a vacation. You can't do the things that you would like to do. In the meanwhile, the people who can afford a house can keep buying a house, and they can jack up the rents to the people who can't afford to buy a house. So I think one of the biggest things is trying to get people into homes. And once you get some of the higher end people who are renting to buy a home, it opens up the market for rentals, and the rental market will go down, the price. But you got to get that gap. And the gap is really the down payments of these houses. Right. And I talked about putting down payment assistance towards a lot of those people who are individuals who could reap the benefits of having a down payment assistance. From there, they're forgiven. It could be forgiven if they stayed there for 5 or 10 years or whatever. But we need to get the suburban towns like Dartmouth, Fairhaven, and Acushnet to allow us to have zoning to allow for home ownership, not rental properties. Not having big developers come in and go, okay, we're going to give you Section 8, or we're going to give you low income, we're going to give you work type rent, and then we'll have regular market prices. We're not going to do that. What we're going to say is we're going to build an area where you can have, single family homes. Our goal is you live there 5 or 6, 7 years, you sell it, you make some money, you move on to a bigger house. the person who's renting can now move into that house.
So it's an issue that you're going to need. It's not I mean, obviously it's specific to New Bedford, but you need other communities, smaller communities, to help with the issue.
Well, let's just look at New Bedford. Where else can we build in New Bedford?
Right.
I mean, they're squeezing in houses up off of Acushnet Avenue for the last 15 years, and all these little areas that were woods back in the day. But where else? Literally, where can we build houses and build that?
And you're talking a good amount of houses. Too.
Yeah. And I'm not. But if Dartmouth had an area where you could build 30 or 40 single-family homes, little small ranches, much like Pine Hill Acres is, and how it was built in the 60s and 70s, or 50s, 60s, and 70s. Then you look at other areas. You could do that in Dartmouth, Rehoboth, Berkeley. And now all of a sudden you're able to expand that and allow people to move into those areas and have a real investment that they can pass on to their kids.
Got 2 minutes left. I want to touch base because I know beginning in the next session you will be taking over more of the north end of New Bedford than you have. And obviously parallel products is a big issue that the north end has been dealing with, and that's now going to be on your plate. Not that it wasn't before, but it's your district now. Thoughts on where we stand on that?
So I think there's two things to look at up in the north end. Is parallel products is one, but there's a collateral consequence of parallel products is traffic. One on the parallel products is we're dealing mostly with a balance between what DEP wants, because we really don't have any more landfills in Massachusetts. We need to get rid of the trash. We need places to put them. DEP will be saying we need this facility, we need to do this. At the same time, they want to be able to control it in a greater degree. I am trying to figure out that balance and making sure that the safety concerns, the odors, all the nuisance things that can occur as a result of that are protected by the community and the neighborhood. But the other part about this is the traffic. It's already a mess. If you go by Brayley Road, Pulaski School in the morning or at the afternoon dismissal, it's a horror show. We need to figure out a solution to do that. I've talked about that as being a potential enter from the back end of Acushnet Avenue and have the school buses to be able to enter there or the parents enter there. We've done a similar thing in Dartmouth at the Cushman School. It's smaller, but there's much bigger space in New Bedford where we could pull that off. It includes a park that they altered a little bit. They brought in a cul-de-sac where the parents can line up, the kids get called out, they get in their car and they drive off. Similar circumstances could happen up there, and I think that makes sense for the people in the north end.
A lot going on.
Yeah,
plenty to do.
Plenty to do.
Thanks very much for joining us again. Happy holidays to you.
Yeah, you too.
And we will see you in the new year.
Great to see you. Thanks.
That's going to do it for this edition of the Beacon Hill Report. Chris Markey, our guest. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Where's your emergency?
There are almost 6 million military and veteran caregivers across the nation. One of the most important elements of caregiving is taking care of yourself.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving for a free military veterans guide to navigate your caregiving journey.